Good day, everybody. Welcome back to Cheryl's Kitchen. I'm Charlie Niner, your host, writer, and producer. The subjects I deal with are often dark periods of history that include a lot of violence and traumatic incidents, so viewer and listener discretion is advised. I'm going to go down the line that I started with the Lenin-Stalin series that I did, and that is of Eastern European dictators. I never knew these people existed until December 1989, when their communist dictatorship was overthrown. I recall this couple were being led away to be executed. They went to their deaths not meekly, but cursing their guards, their judges, and their executioners all the way. They were executed by firing squad on or about Christmas Day, 1989, after a show trial. They came from the nation that now contains the regions of Wallachia and Transylvania, the lands of Dracula Vlad the Impaler, and the inspiration behind Bram Stoker's Dracula. Their names are Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu of Romania, and this is their story. So why, you ask, was his wife Elena executed along with him? Well, I hope to make this clear as we take our journey into 20th century Romania. Before we go on with anything else, you may have a question. What exactly is a show trial? It's exactly what it says. It's a trial for show. Look, we gave them a trial. What more do you want? Show trials are often brief and sometimes without any lawyers representing the accused. If there is a lawyer representing the accused, it doesn't matter, as the verdict is predetermined. Do you have any questions? No? That's good. So I think we should start talking about Romania itself, where exactly it is, that sort of thing. So let's begin. The short answer to this is Romania is in Eastern Europe. It's bordered by the Ukraine in the north, Moldova in the east, the Black Sea in the southeast, Bulgaria to the south, Serbia in the southwest, and Hungary to the west. The capital is Bucharest, and the population of Romania is about 19 million today. Ethnicities. There are Romanians, which comprise 89% of the population, Hungarians, another 6.5% of the population, the Roma with 3.3% of the population, and other various ethnicities, 1.3%. Now, the Roma are an interesting demographic as their origin is northern India. We know them today as gypsies, which some consider a racial slur, but they're also known as the Roma or the Romani. So let's talk about the Ceausescus, Nicolae and Elena, as I get my thoughts together here, because I am apparently not very well organized. So, in 1965, Nicolae Ceausescu came to power. Nicolae was born in 1918, and so by that time he'd be 47 years old. He'd been incarcerated a number of times for belonging to the Communist Party. His wife Elena was born in 1916, and the two were married in December of 1947. She was not a well-educated woman, but as we shall see, she was ambitious. As Nicolae took control, he enacted several laws that could be seen as progressive. He had ensured that Romania had its own foreign policy independent to that of the USSR. He withdrew Romania from the Warsaw Pact. He condemned the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia. Some of his acts, however, were not so progressive. In October 1966, he banned abortion and contraception. And this led to a number of catastrophic things. So let's go on. The Ceausescus visited several Western nations, including the USA, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Spain, and Australia. He visited India, North Korea, China, the USSR, and North Vietnam. Now, Nicolae wanted Romania to be a world power, and he wanted to be seen as a statesman. So it was in these visits to North Korea and China that Ceausescu's, or at least Nicolae, wanted to emulate the style of dictatorship of Chairman Mao and Kim Il-sung. So Romania now begins its descent. Nicolae resurrects a Stalinist-type regime, and I'm sure you know what I mean just having listened to my parts on Stalin, and also if you've researched it, you'll know what I mean. Communist ideology was paramount and no deviation was permitted. In 1973 and 74, Nicolae decided that the oil refinery business was the way to his nation's prosperity. His plan was ambitious. The problem was money. Romania needed to take massive loans to build the refineries. And he took a lot of these loans and donated them to the third world to curry favor. The problem was actually Romania's workers were not the most productive. In building the refineries was a job that probably should have been contracted out. The refineries were finished years behind schedule, and by that time, oil prices had tanked, making the refineries useless. So how does Elena fit into all this, you might ask? Well, during a visit to China in 1971, Elena noticed that Chairman Mao's wife was a powerful woman who had a position of power, and actually named a position of power. Now, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, totally unscripted. But in the Western world, I don't think you can find anybody that, or any president, prime minister that actually elevated their spouse to a position of cabinet power. It would be like Justin Trudeau elevating Sophie to Minister of the Environment or something like that. So she had a position of power. I don't think that could happen here. So these people talk to one another. And in my experience, the people that rule nations are quite often well-educated. They marry into well-educated or somewhat highly educated people, and they're very intelligent. So they discuss things, whether or not they have those security clearances or not. So the power behind the throne, I would say, is there, just not as visible as it was in Romania. Eventually, Elena worked her way up to becoming a Politburo member, and in March 1980 became the first deputy prime minister. Remember, she was ambitious. Elena was also revered as Mother of the Nation. Now, don't ask me who revered her as Mother of the Nation. I have no idea. And she often sought high honors and awards despite having achieved very little. As an example, she was awarded a PhD in chemistry, but after her death, a lot of people came out and said, yeah, she stole our work. We plagiarized it for her. It really wasn't her work. So now we have an ambitious couple who now rule a communist nation. As Nicolae made his way in the world of international politics, he was praised by George H.W. Bush, the elder Bush, and his U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, which that knighthood was revoked on the 24th of December, 1989. Politics really does make strange bedfellows. There were a few attempts at overthrowing him, one in 1984 and one in 1987. The one in 1987 was defeated by the Securitate, the secret police of Nikolai. And the one in 1984, a military unit was tasked to overthrow him. However, they were sent to harvest corn instead. So their downfall in 1989. In the city of Timisoara, demonstrations against the attempted deportation of a Hungarian minister occurred. The demonstration eventually turned into an anti-government demonstration. The Securitate, the military, and the police fired on the demonstrators on the 17th of December, 1989. On the 21st of December, Nikolai spoke to the demonstrators, but he was heckled. The Ceausescus then took cover inside the building. The rebellion had started. On the 22nd of December, Nikolai tried to speak to the crowds once more, but this time he had projectiles thrown at him. So again, they took cover inside the building, eventually escaped to the roof mere seconds ahead of the demonstrators, and they escaped by helicopter. They were then turned over after the helicopter landed, and they made a few more moves to try and get away. They were eventually turned over to the army. So on the 25th of December, they were tried on charges of illegally gathering wealth and genocide. They stood trial, which was very quick, and you can actually look at it on YouTube. They were to be executed separately, but they demanded to die together. Their wish was granted. They were restrained, their hands tied behind their backs. The couple was then marched out and executed. So why would you execute a deposed dictator? It's really quite simple if you're the person coming into power. Dictators have a following. They have a certain amount of charisma, so they may be able to rally their followers to overthrow whoever ousted them. If they're dead, they can't do that. As an example, I'm going to use a leader that never was, Leon Trotsky. Stalin absolutely hated him and was afraid of Trotsky, so he had Trotsky executed. The Ceausescus were buried in simple graves and were later exhumed to conduct DNA testing. Someone thought that the executions were fake, but there was enough DNA left to actually say conclusively these are the Ceausescus. They were reburied under a tombstone this time. People still leave flowers and symbols of communism. So why do they have a following still? Again, the answer is quite simple. For some people, this was the only form of government, the only way of life they knew. And the revolution turned that nation upside down. Others have a romantic view of communism. And if we've learned anything from communism, it doesn't work. So that concludes my episode of Cheryl's Kitchen, at least this particular one. This one I really enjoyed researching because I just kind of remembered it out of the blue. And I remember this couple's, arguing with their people that were trying them. And I thought, wow, this is something else. This really needs to be brought out. So this was a predictor of the fall of the Iron Curtain. And a few years later, another nation fell, and that was the former Republic of Yugoslavia. So I'm looking at doing a number of episodes on the former Republic of Yugoslavia. It's a place where I served twice. So in conclusion, I have some words of advice for you. Don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And that's it for another episode of Cheryl's Kitchen.